Are we dealing with the owners, with a third-party consultant? What is that role of that third-party consultant that we're dealing with? Do they have the expertise in either vertical construction, civil construction, or are they just brought in to have a checklist of things that they look at in the schedule, and they're not really understanding how the schedule's built, how we're tracking, or even how the schedule should function?
It's a commissioning schedule where you get to a certain point, you're doing different things every single day, and they're all working towards getting that system up. But you may go do this box that day, this box this day, but based on what happened on that first box, you may have to completely change your order. And if you're trying to maintain a perfect finish to start DCMA 14 perfect schedule for commissioning, you can't do it, and you're going to spend more time fiddling with it than actually using it as a tool.
How we're tracking the schedule, or even how the schedule should function as maybe design is rolling out. And a lot of times we're trying to bridge the gap of not only teaching their third-party consultant, but also helping the owner understand why we're building a schedule in a certain fashion due to some limitations, constraints, or just kind of our theory of how scheduling should work.
Let's say I'm inexperienced at buying projects. I just want things built because actually I get money from operating them. Name whatever asset you want. What I've seen in the industry is that some owners will buy projects piecemeal, and some prefer to buy turnkey.
Hi, folks. A quick one before we dive into this week's episode. Our book, The Critical Path Career, How to Advance in Construction Planning and Scheduling, is out now, and you can order it on Amazon. We'll include a link below. This is a great way to show support for the Beyond Deadlines podcast, and Greg and I have worked extremely hard taking everything we know in our 30 years of experience, plus everything we've picked up from shooting this podcast, and we've tried to pack it into an information-dense book that you can use right away. In the book, we have specific strategies on how to get a raise, how to get a promotion, and find a new job. We include 26 of the best interview questions that we have come across, in addition to 34 specific impact ideas that you can go use on your projects today. We want to thank everyone who's shown us support so far, and enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager.
My name's Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
I'm Scott Carrico, owner and founder of Overall Consulting.
Today, we are going to deal with a challenging owner. Greg and I are going to pretend that we are challenging to work with, that we are difficult sometimes, and we try to have the best interest of the project in mind, but we may not always follow that path. Scott is going to be on the hot seat. Scott, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Your challenge, as indicated, is you're dealing with a challenging owner who has given all scheduling, planning and scheduling responsibility oversight over to a third party. And you've been bumping up against different sorts of issues. How do you handle this situation?
That's challenging for most schedulers. Is who are we really dealing with? Are we dealing with the owners in these? Or are we really dealing with a third-party consultant? And then what is that role of that third-party consultant that we're dealing with? Do they have the expertise in either vertical construction, civil construction, or are they just brought in to really just have kind of a checklist of things that they look at in the schedule, and they're not really understanding how the schedule's built, how we're tracking the schedule, or even how the schedule should function as maybe design is rolling out? And a lot of times we're kind of trying to bridge the gap of not only teaching maybe their third-party consultant, but also helping the owner understand why we're building a schedule in a certain fashion due to some limitations, constraints, or just kind of our theory of how scheduling should work. So we're always challenged with when a owner brings on a third-party consultant and they don't define their role or have their expertise really in the project to begin with.
Yeah. Well, let's stay in this ambiguous soup for just a second. And let's say early on in the engagement, we'll get right into something. It's a baseline schedule review. You send me the schedule, I send it back, and I say, Scott, you failed the DCMA and you have hundreds of activities with too high of total float. What do you do next?
I have a annoyance with total float personally. I understand why we have total float. I understand how total float is calculated, but at the end of the day, you can typically manipulate that number to whatever you want it to say. And a lot of times I'm working with the owner scheduler to say, what does total float really mean here in this instance? Example, hey, we don't have design in certain portions of the schedule, right? We're really just have one long bar waiting for a design to come out. Yeah, your total float's going to be huge at that point. So as you build out those relationships, you have to explain to the owner and the third-party scheduler why the total floats look like that. A lot of times also the DCMA is a great checklist, but they are just going through, going check, 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 but not understanding what they're checking off. And I have a hard time with certain consultants because you have to educate them. Does the logic make sense? At the end of the day, do I have dry-in tied to the right spots? Do I have foundations tied to the right spots? Skin, does it actually drive something in our schedule? If not, are we incorporating some type of workaround in the schedule? And that workaround will then throw up your total float in certain areas because you have that workaround instead. So maybe dry-in has 300 days of float, but that's because we have a workaround, right? And we're going to move through rough-ins without a dry-in building. So it's that typical working with that third party to educate them because they've already answered to the owner what the problem is. So now they have to go back to the owner and explain to them what they didn't catch. So that's a typical solution that we have to work with in our industry.
We're talking about a challenging client tonight, so I'm going to enter this discussion with a whiskey. Here we go. So I'm a little, Scott, you're a little bit wobbly to me right now. And I'm going to actually go to something quite fundamental, which is I've hired a consultant because I've got no capability in my department, company, my organization for scheduling. I know I need scheduling done. You talked a lot of words there about float and things, and I don't really care about whatever you just talked about. I want generally things done and not to worry about schedule. What do you say to someone like me?
With the owner, if I'm talking to the owner, which is rare, I'm usually talking to their consultant and playing telephone with them. So that's a little bit difficult. But if I am talking to the owner, I'm explaining at that point milestones. I mean, all they're looking at is a milestone schedule. They want to see, are we on track? Do we hit certain milestones? And then are we finished? That's all they really want to understand. But again, that kind of goes back to trying to bring up my theory of scheduling up to the higher level of saying, hey, this is how we're going to build a schedule. Graphics are always the best. 4D scheduling, even better for them. But I'm not talking total float at that point. I'm talking about, are we hitting our milestones and what are the delays that we foresee? Doing a risk mitigation on the schedule before you even start, right? During the baseline schedule, trying to explain to them, hey, we are going to hit this level of predictability. Here's our delays that we're thinking. Obviously, I always encourage outside party to help you with your risk mitigation on your schedule so they can get a fresh look of eyes on it and then help build that as a confidence booster. And at that point, you're almost working around their scheduler and telling them, hey, we've thought of it all. We're moving past that.
I'm just going to pull on a tiny thread, if I may, there, actually, because I'm doing research into this at the moment around predictability. And lo and behold, there are so many types. Can I just confirm that when you say about predictability of milestones, are you talking about on a specific date, or are you talking about on or before, or are you talking about the probability of on or before a specific date, or does it really depend? I just want to know what's the most common you see.
The most common, obviously, is on, but any owner wants on or before, right? Can we get it before that? What's the predictability that we can get it before that? But if I was just speaking about that one milestone date that everybody puts in their head, especially your general super, they're on by dates. What is the date that we're going to hit? They don't know how they're going to get there yet, but they just know they're going to finish on that date. And what's that predictability based on the risks that they are working against.
Does that answer your question, owner Greg?
Honest, I've not come across a very difficult, like a truly difficult owner, so I'm struggling to get in the headspace. So alcohol is helping me get there.
We're about to ratchet this up for Scott. So let's just say in this situation, Scott, Greg is the owner and I'm the third party consultant that you're dealing with, right? And let's say that, and this happens from time to time, I send a nasty note to Greg saying, Scott has done a bad job at scheduling. They failed the DCMA. They have high total float. We can't believe this schedule. How do you work to then repair a bit of that relationship and try and steer the consultant in the right way to not constantly run to mom and dad, way to put it, and to build on that relationship in a functional, helpful way?
We have that on many jobs. That's not uncommon. That every third-party consultant wants to show that they're a little bit better, and then they're really looking out for the client at the end of the day. So they'll just mark stuff up, right? So a lot of times it's an honest conversation. How honest are you with them? Can you tell them where your pitfalls are in the schedule? Can you tell them kind of where you're hiding some fluff in the schedule? And that opens the door to, we know that there's a risk here. We know that we have high float in the commissioning. We get that. We haven't built out the commission yet. We know we have high float, but look at our plan that we want to do. We're going to tie these equipment to this activity. Our expectation is this is going to happen here, and have that education moment, not only with that third party consultant, but also possibly with the owner when you're talking about, hey, are we going to hit that final milestone? And if we are, these are the things that we need to build out in the schedule. Hey, owner, how can you help us get a commissioning agent on board so we can validate the plan for the commissioning of the building? So it's just true, honest communication. And we have so many clients that we work with that have good schedulers that have that communication skill. It's really hard when you're going against a junior or freshman scheduler and they don't understand what you're saying. So it's hard for them to communicate back saying, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about.
I'm going to probe there a little bit. I'm going to go out of my dazed, drunken client persona, and I'm going to go back
in. You're the owner. I thought you were the owner.
I'm the owner, sorry. Again, dazed, drunken. Because I think what you said there is such a key point, and it's actually something that people learn from experience, but no one ever articulates really, really clearly. And the way that I see this is, I'm going to ask a different question, but hopefully you see the logic behind it, which is, I don't know if you have children. 3, there you go. How would you explain your children if someone's saying stuff to be combative and making it a me and them scenario? What mindset should you approach that with to make it a us, same team, let's not go down that route scenario? Because I'm cutting through because there's a planning logic, which is you're correct. Like this is the float, this is the milestones, this is how it's done. But there's an underlying people logic, which is this is how we deal with aggressive people interactions.
That is hard. Yeah, you're right. I'm a very competitive person. So if you're going to come at me with like, I can do you better kind of thing, I have to check myself. And that's the hardest part probably in those meetings. Typically, it's kind of getting down to asking what information do they really want. It's asking the why and why and why without being annoying and saying, oh, I hear this, but are you asking this or are you asking this? Recently, we were literally talking about total float. Hey, you have a lot of total float in your schedule and here and here and here. Well, yeah, those are on like commissioning of booster pumps. Mm-hmm. Does that really matter to turning over a building? No, not turning over the building on day 1 of the schedule. I got to get air flowing instead. So yeah, air flowing is a bigger issue than putting water to the sinks at the moment. So you're constantly asking, okay, so you see high float there. Why does that matter to you? And typically it's because there's another driver. IDF rooms are a big one. They always love to get IDF rooms early. And you're like, why? Well, we have our own turnover schedule for our internal IT group. Well, can I see their schedule? Well, they're waiting on you. Okay, that's great. What information can I get them to help them make a better decision? And I keep moving forward. Yeah, I have high float, but I'm going to give you this information and we're going to shoot for these dates. Now give me your turnover schedule and I can get that into my schedule and you'll see those float values drop because I'm now incorporating your scope of work. So to answer your question in short is trying to understand why they're either frustrated or why they need to know something is the hardest part of typically a meeting, because everyone wants to get short, sweet out the door. But if you don't understand the why, you may just be talking past each other or in circles.
So I'll double click on that because I think that's a very very interesting route to go down, and Micah can pull us up in a second. I'm going to go back into my persona of slightly drunken owner. Here we go.
That's normal.
It's been a long week, Scott. It's the week before Christmas. It's not smooth for me. And let's say I'm inexperienced at buying projects. I just want things built because actually I get money from operating them. Name whatever asset you want. What I've seen in the industry is that some owners will buy projects piecemeal. So I buy a designer, and then I buy, and then I buy a refit. I kind of separate everything. And some prefer to buy turnkey. So some prefer to buy, I want someone to design, procure, and build, and commission, and hand over this thing. Just pick a project. If I, as this drunken owner, actually had a moment of realization and were like, Scott, which one's better? Because you actually mentioned in your last answer interacting with other teams to create integrated schedules.
Which one's better? I think it's the size of the project that helps determine that a little bit. I've been a part of a lot of projects where it is turnkey, right? You design big build and you just go out and build it and then you turn it over. But where's the savings? Where's the collaboration in that? Was there an opportunity that was missed in savings? I like IPD is great. As long as, again, all players are on the same page and all truly benefiting from the contract. I do enjoy IPD much better, but the problem there is you're building out a schedule with very little information from day one, and you're constantly adding to that schedule. Design, bid, build, I can get you a schedule at the bid time, right? Design's done. IPD is much different. So there's a lot more planning involved.
Can you just quickly, for the people who may not be familiar with IPD, explain why that is?
Why IPD?
Why you don't have as much information as a design bid build?
Because with IPD, you're bringing in the designer, the CM, construction manager, the general contractor, possibly even better if you're bringing in all your key trades, your electrical trade, your elevators, your plumbing trades, all together at the beginning and not waiting to hand over information. You're trying to find ways to save money from day one and build the best project possible. As long as those incentives are there for all, we do a great job at planning. If with design, bid, build, it's you hire all them at the end, all the trade contractors at the end. The GC got the design at the end, right? And that it's a little bit harder to find those ways to improve quality, improve safety, cost savings. So going back to IPD, I do enjoy that because it involves those relationships with the major trades and everyone's sitting in the same room with the same true goal, not just with design, bid, build. The goal is to make as much money in a little time as possible. I think the IPD is more you're trying to give a quality product back to the owner, and we're working together as a team, so no one's pointing fingers at the end of the day. I do enjoy that a little bit more as a scheduler or planner. If I was just a true scheduler, I'd love P6 and typing in things. Design, bid, build, I'll do that all day long. But getting into the weeds and planning and trying to find solutions is, I think, the next level up of a true scheduler.
Yeah, and we could go probably shoot a whole episode on contract types and things like that. I want to shift gears just a little bit back to our problem area. We talked a little bit about owners providing information and how that increases collaboration. What sort of tactics or strategies do you have to help facilitate that better? Let's say the owner is giving you late information. Let's say the owner is withholding certain things, and then you ask, has there anything you found where you can help improve that process and make sure you get their commissioning agent or get their procurement log or whatever it is? How do you improve that sort of facilitation of information from the owner?
To improve that, I think I've learned is you can't get stuck. A lot of times, hey, their commissioning agent is not on board, or their commissioning agent just got on board. They need some time, right? If you get stuck in that, like, well, I can't do anything, not my problem, it will be your problem. Majority of the time, you are now screwed with them trying to undig yourself from this hole. Many people I've learned in this industry is if you come to the table with a plan, they're probably going to help you improve it at the end of the day. If you come to the table and just sit and listen, not a lot gets done in these meetings. There's a whole lot of pointing fingers, and I told somebody else to do it. But come prepared, come with an idea, and that you become that leader at that point. And then you are delegating your plan versus waiting for someone else to come up with their plan and delegating that to you, and then you may not agree with it. So going back to where you start, get prepared, look at the drawings. What makes sense? What works for your company? I mean, be selfish. What works for you? And let them poke holes in it at the end of the day. That's typically where I'll start with a meeting, is having that plan before I get there and knowing what may be the pitfalls that we may run into.
I like that. That's perfect. Happy hour owner Greg. And by the way, Scott, he's in a different country in a different time zone. So it's not 9:30
That's why I'm
a.m.
doing this. It's like evening where I am.
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify that just in case you were a little,
No, I figured.
A little Irish coffee. I don't know.
The Irish coffee already.
Owner Greg, any happy hour thoughts before we start turning to close the door on this one?
I actually think we could go down the route a lot on this. I actually find it quite difficult to stay in happy hour client/owner Greg, because I actually have loads of questions, Scott, about how you do this, because I haven't spent a huge amount of time being a scheduler reporting to a difficult client or owner. The one thing that was circling around my mind on what you were just saying, which was fantastic advice to people in that situation, how do you not get in that situation in the first place? Are there any things that you can do up front to identify if a client or owner is going to be a bad person to work with and to just not engage with them in the first place?
I have a choice not to engage with them. I have to engage. But I mean, some key tells that when I get handed a project, first thing I ask for is specs. I ask for drawings. I ask for award notices, right? First thing I do. And from those specs, I can tell you if you have no clue what you're asking for, or you're going to be a good owner and you value what the scheduling and planning portion of the project is. Example, if your specs say, I follow DCMA, I need a DCMA report, I know you probably don't have a whole lot of clue what you just asked for. But if you're talking about, hey, every activity needs to have certain milestones attached to them, we're tracking these different milestones in your schedule, we want a meeting, a weekly or monthly meeting with the scheduler, I can see that you value this already and it's easier to engage with you. If I go into that meeting knowing that all you want is DCMA, is at that point, I feel like I'm bringing out my middle school teacher certificate that I have and say, let me explain to you what you really asked for and why this is not as good as if I tell you this. Lots of softwares out there that really help take people past DCMA 14 and give you a better graphic or give you a better narrative that you can just run your schedules through versus just giving them the basic schedule log, and be like, well, there's your DCMA 14. I hope you enjoy it, right? That's kind of where I'm kind of working towards.
I'll pull one part from that, and then I'll be quiet, which is just for the listeners who might not be incredibly familiar with DCMA. Let's pull one of them, which is
how many start durations,
or how many starts. Yeah, exactly. Why? So, can you explain why a good percentage is not a good indicator of a good schedule?
Oh yeah, I mean, I deal with schedules that are 20 to 40,000 activity line items, right? And especially early on, you're going to have start to starts, especially with IPDs, right? Because you don't have those relationships. You haven't built out your schedule enough to get either a finish to start or something else to help drive the next logical item in the schedule. So if you run my early schedules on my projects, you're going to see a DCMA that fails because I do have start to starts. I have lags. I have durations that are huge because commissioning maybe 150 days, depending on what size of the project is, right? But when I'm done with my schedule and built it out and have a baseline of some sort, that commissioning is down to 5 days. But you had to give me a chance to get there. So it's really hard when people don't understand that DCMA doesn't scale well at the end of the day. If you go by those metrics, it just doesn't scale well. Another example, how many activities you have on your critical path. A lot of them say you can't have less than 50, you have to have less than 15% of your activities on a critical path. Support that 100%, great for government contracts, great for 100 million or less. Works great. Let's try to keep that. I have a 40,000 activity schedule, and I have, I think, 5% of my activities on the critical path. Over 100 some, 200 some activities already on the critical path. If you only go by the percentage, it looks slow. You look at the true number of activities, that's a lot. And now you want me to put 10%? You want me to put, what, 400, whatever it is, on the critical path? All we're going to do is have fire drills the entire time trying to fix things. And that a lot of them won't be truly critical at the end of the day. So you get to look at what the schedule is, what you're building, and does it make sense, and not just spit out a number and be like, well, it doesn't meet that DCMA.
Yeah, the other one that comes to mind is if you have your commissioning schedule like in your bigger schedule, and then it's a commissioning schedule where you get to a certain point, you're doing different things every single day, and they're all working towards getting that system up. But you may go do this box that day, this box this day, this day. But like based on what happened on that first box, you may have to completely flip and change your order. And if you're trying to maintain a perfect finish to start DCMA 14 perfect schedule for commissioning, you can't do it, and you're going to spend more time fiddling with it than actually using it as a tool. So that was another example that came to mind where it just doesn't fit in that box. Scott, loved having you on today. I hope we weren't too challenging of owners for you. Before we jump, anything you want to leave the crowd with?
I really enjoyed this. I love you guys' podcast. Learn from it all the time, actually. I think this is something that's going to be great for our industry of having these discussions. So look forward to more of these. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, folks, thanks for joining us this week. If you could, please share with one of your coworkers, one of your friends, like and subscribe wherever you watch and listen. And from us at Beyond Deadlines, have a good one, and we'll see you on the next one.